Good evening, everyone. It's just gone 7 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 24th of May, 2022. Welcome to this NSS session. Before I get started, how are you guys doing? Any questions or queries or comments? You can either chat in the, type them in the chat box, or simply unmute and talk. Any questions? Any confusions, queries from anyone? Sounds like all is good. Well, what I'm going to do then is launch into our slides for tonight, which is I'm really just going to run through the second part of the assignment again. That's the main part of what I'm going to be talking about tonight, and then I'm also going to do a brief cover of the last part of the assignment, task 3, or the final part of the assignment. So let me just share, let me share my screen. So hopefully my whole screen is being shared. Also, what I'm going to do is share the PowerPoint slides, and when I do that, it's going to I'm not going to be able to see the comments. So if you've got a comment to make or a question to ask while we go along, please just unmute. Occasionally I will just check if there are written comments, but please just unmute and talk. But right now I can see that Sheree is saying the feedback on the first task is not showing on my assignment. That's strange. What I've done, the way I do my feedback is it's little yellow sticky notes. So if you go to the assignment that I have assessed, that I've marked, it should, as you scroll through it, there will be little yellow sticky notes. If you click on those, it shows the comments I've made. But what I can do is after the session is just double check what might be happening. So I'm just going to make a note of this. And see what we can do. Sorry, I'm just writing down this so I don't forget. Cool. Okay, I'll try and see what I can sort for that. Right, let's get the PowerPoint going. So we've got, it's the Collab session. It is what we call a national support session for task 2 of the assignment. Just to confirm, all the ICE tasks, and you have to do at least 4 out of the 5 that are available to get the full 10%. If you do 4, you get 10%. If you do 5, you still get 10%. All of those are due by the end of this Friday, the 27th of May. Then your task 2 is due on Monday the 30th, and your final POE at this stage is due on the 15th of June. Yeah, that's when it's due. Let me just see what is going on here with the meeting. Ramoni, did you want to ask something? Can I just ask that if you do want to ask me, just unmute and go ahead and talk and interrupt me. You're welcome to do that. Go ahead, Ramoni.
Hi, Jim. How are you doing?
You're right today.
Yeah, not too bad. I just wanted to find out, I think it was the first ICE task that we needed to submit. I think there was a question. So I did email it to you, but I'm not too sure. I haven't received any response via email or...
Okay,
the mark hasn't been updated.
Yeah, I'm going to go through all of that in the next day or 2 and sort out all the outstanding stuff with what's been sent in. So don't worry about that.
Okay, no problem. All right, cool. Thanks. Okay.
Pleasure. Thanks for following up on it. That's great, yeah. Okay, so as I was saying, task 2 is due next Monday, and then a couple of weeks later, the final task of the POE is due. So task 2 is made up, as we've seen already, and hopefully you guys are cracking this out. If you've left it to the last minute to do, you've still got quite a lot of work, although it is just under a week away. And for some people, that's still not the last minute. So you've still got time to put things together. It's a scope statement, a project charter, a work breakdown structure, procurement and budget, and project software screen grabs, which sets you up for the final task of the POE. And then the final task, and we'll discuss this briefly later, and there are the 6 tasks there. Okay. So on task 2, question 1 for 10 marks, in not less than 10 lines and not more than 15 lines, write the scope statement. I've been through this before, just to whiz through it again, and if you've got any questions, just unmute and interrupt me. But the scope statement, it gives the following. Let me just get this pen going here so that I can make notes and just see what it keeps changing the color. Okay, so the scope statement gives a broad description of what the project will produce or deliver. We're going to build a power station or a school or whatever it is. And then it's a list of any specific things that may not be, that you're not going to include. So it's explicitly stating we're going to do this, but these are the things we're not going to do. So it's just to clarify. In a good scope statement, you say what you're going to be doing in the project, but it's also very useful to say, to be clear what you're not going to be doing, because it avoids any confusion down the line. Then it would have a total budget of the project and estimates of the timing of the spend and the broad schedule of the project. So at the level of a scope statement, which comes quite early on in even before the planning phase of a project, you are setting out very broadly the main things of the project. How much it's going to cost as an estimate. It would still not be final costs, but it would be the costs that you're looking to spend on the project, the timing of the project, and what it is you're going to deliver. So really it comes back to that triangle. And there's some more detailed pages 84 to 87 of the textbook. So for example, and I've written this up as a rough example to show you the sort of thing that would be included. This project will deliver a boutique conference center with capacity for up to 30 guests, including overnight accommodation. It will also provide a health spa and entertainment room. The project will not include a swimming pool, tennis courts, or any data IT equipment. The overall cost of the project is 75 million, broken down as follows: professional fees paid up front, construction deposit 20% also paid up front. Sorry, just getting this thing out the way here. In progress payments of 12% each. There are 5 of those. And then a contingency amount of 4% or 3 million. Okay, so that's your kind of spare money to play with when not if, but when things go wrong. So that's the kind of timing of the money and the total figure that you're looking at for the project at a broad level. The schedule is as follows: starting 1 July, design process and sign off will take 3 months, plan submission and approval will take 3 months, site setup 2 weeks, construction 20 weeks, anticipated handover date 31 May 2022. So that is a very short, kind of rough project scope statement to give you an idea of what you would need to include for your project. What you can do, I'm just giving a tip down the bottom here. This is a tip to guide you. What you can do is do questions 2 and 3 beforehand, and then come back and write question 1, knowing some of the detail that you've got. Okay, but remember, in real life, a scope statement would be written before you go into the detailed planning and work out exactly how much the project is going to cost. And very often that upfront scope statement, the cost and the schedule that you put into that might end up changing quite significantly as you go into the detailed planning of the project. So are there any questions on the scope statement? Just unmute and talk if you do have questions. Okay, forgive the silence, but I'm just waiting a few seconds before moving on, just in case somebody has got a question. And if you think of something later, just come back and ask. Somebody wants to ask? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Tim.
Yes.
If we had to follow your example, would that be good enough, or would we need to elaborate on additional items
No, well,
in a textbook or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you. You know, it would be good for you to go a bit further than what I've got here. You know, give a little more thought and detail around what your project is. What I'm just showing you is the kind of skeleton or bones of what must go into it. You must include budget, you must include schedule, you must include a brief description of what the project is.
Okay, yeah, because for this question, see, for the other questions, they do give some sort of marking rubric, but over here it just says not less than 10 lines and not more than 15. Write a scope statements.
Yeah, no, there's not a great deal of guidance, and so that's why I've put together this example for you.
Okay, no problem.
And you can work off that, yeah. And it is just 10 marks, so it's not a huge chunk of marks for what has to be done here.
Yeah, correct. Okay, thanks.
Okay, cool. And just to all of us, always remember when you see like here it says 10 marks, that's 10 marks out of 100 for this part of the assignment. What that is actually, it's 10 marks out of 300 marks, because you've got part one of your assignment which you've already handed in, and that was worth 100 marks. This part of the assignment is worth 100 marks, and what you hand in the middle of June is also worth 100 marks. So these 10 is actually out of 300 marks for your whole for your final mark of your course. Plus there's the ICE tasks that get thrown in as well. So it's actually you know, when it comes down to it, it's the proportion of marks here is not huge. So always bear that in mind with the kind of time and effort that you put into the various questions. Just measure it against the marks that have been allocated to that question. Then we get to question 2, which is a project charter. Project charter, it's clearly described page 81 of the textbook with an example on page 82. It's also clearly spelt out in the allocation table or rubric given on page 14 of the assignment. Very clear guidance given there, specifically what sections you need to include. By the way, the example on page 82 is pretty short and sweet. That's a fairly basic project charter. You can go, you know, give a little bit more information and meat on it. It is worth 30 marks out of the 100 for this, so it's worth putting in a bit of effort on this. And make sure you go through the rubric and see and through the headings in the textbook and see that you've accounted for and included everything that you need to. Any questions on the charter? Yeah, somebody got their hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to find out on the project charter, the referencing, how does one go about?
Good question. Well, for me, the question is, where did you find out how to do a project charter? Do you have the textbook? If you've got the textbook, then at the beginning of the question, you could, what a lot of students do and what's good is just to write a simple definition of what a charter is. A charter is a short document giving the outline of the project or whatever it is. Or you say, according to the authors of the book, according to Kuhn, Anderson et al., project charter is the launch point of the project, and it is structured as follows. So you're referencing it like that, or at the end of the question you just put in brackets right at the bottom of your answer to this question. So at the end of the charter you just put a reference, Kuhn et al. If you've referenced it already. If you haven't referenced Kuhn and the textbook already, then you've put all of their surnames in for the first time you do an in-text reference, and then you just give that reference in brackets, the correct in-text reference. If you haven't got the textbook and you've used some other guidance, then it might be a website, and you just do a standard in-text reference for the website you've used to guide you. But really, when it comes to referencing, the person, which is me in this case, marking an assessment is always saying, where did you learn about that? Where did you find out about this? You know, you didn't just dream it up. Where did you get this information? You know, at least the structure of a project charter, because a project charter within the context of project management has a very clear set of headings and a clear structure to it. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yes. So I can just, in the text, I don't have to reference, I can just put up the reference list. Will that be okay? Or that will
No.
be like,
No, you've got to have a reference list at the end of your assignment submission.
yes.
So you must have a reference list, but in your assignment itself, you must have what are called in-text references.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. And we've given guidance for that, and there's also guidance from Varsity College, you know, librarians. I've made reference in previous sessions to, and I think I've sent out announcements about it as well. There are YouTube videos that show you on how to reference adequately. And I will just remind us some of the basics at the end of the session tonight. Cool. Okay, any other questions on charter? Okay, then that brings us to question 3, which is the work breakdown structure, which is also for 30 marks. And this is clearly described on pages 87 to 91 of the textbook. It's also very clearly spelt out in the mark allocation table given on page 15 of the assignment. And the rubric is given as well, as far as I can recall. Now, the work breakdown structure, as I have highlighted already, and let me just come back here. The work breakdown structure is a critically important part of project management planning, because the breaking down of the work into the specific activities and tasks that need to be done is the foundation for all other project planning activities. If you don't know what you're going to be doing in detail, then how are you going to know how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, who's going to be doing each of those tasks, what risk is attached to them, at what quality standard you're going to be doing that, what you need to buy and purchase for those activities. There's plenty of things that ride on the back of a good work breakdown structure. So your work breakdown structure is really, really, really critical that you do. And that's why it's worth 30 marks at least. It should, in my view, be probably worth a bit more, because it's showing that you have sat down and thought carefully through all of the things that just have to happen in a project. Now, I'll tell you what happens in real life. People say, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. We've got to organize this event, or we've got to build this, or we've got to set up that, or we've got to design a new IT system for this. We'll just find some guys and make them sort it. And you know, we'll quickly organize this and we'll do that. And we should be able to do it for a couple of thousand rand. And you kind of shrug your shoulders and say, oh, no, we'll make it happen. Now, there are a few people in the world who can do it like that, but by far the majority, 99% of people, actually, when you launch into the project, you suddenly realize, oh, flip, we should have thought of this. Oh, damn, we should have thought of that. Crud, what are we going to do now? Flip, hey, we haven't planned this very carefully. You know what? And this actually is going to take, that's going to take a month to do, not a week. And there might be other activities that you think, sure, we thought that would take a month. It's only going to take us a couple of days. And there'll be other things that you say, flip, you know, we only put 1,000 rand aside for that, but it's actually more like 20,000 rand. Now, if that's the way you've planned your project, so that when you start doing your project, you have all of these surprises about the extra money and time it's going to take you, then you haven't done your WBS properly. And it's why we emphasize the WBS so much, is it's your detailed planning. It's the foundation of everything else you do. And I think I've mentioned before the example of a wedding. And the average couple who are getting married, and particularly, if I'm sounding sexist here, but particularly the bride, is very fussy about thinking through everything that's got to happen on her special day. And she makes sure that she's thought of everything and that nothing gets left to chance. And if she's the sort of person who figures I might get some things wrong, and the couple's got the money for it, then they'll all get a wedding planner to do it for them. And in comes the wedding planner, and it's the wedding planner's job to do the work breakdown structure and thrash out all the details. But my standard joke on it is, you don't want a situation where the knife that cuts the cake at the reception, when everybody's watching the first cutting of the cake, it's in our tradition, it's a big event in the day, is cutting the cake. What if there's no knife there? What if if there's no ribbon on the knife? What if the ribbon on the knife is the wrong color and doesn't match the decor? Now, I'm asking silly questions, but actually for some people, those aren't silly. Those are real issues. And for some couples, the whole day can be ruined because one thing wasn't thought of carefully enough and was forgotten. In our wedding, we had a couple of those. I've probably mentioned them before. So make sure your work breakdown structure is absolutely carefully thought through. Sorry, I can't see who's asking the question. Go ahead. Who wants to ask something or say something?
Hi, Tim. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Go ahead.
I just want to know, if you do the work breakdown structure, can you use the 5 different phases as your headings that you're breaking down, or is there something else you should use?
It can be used like that. Personally, I don't like it. I mean, I'm not going to mark you down if you use the phases, provided the work that happens under each phase is adequately documented and thought through. So let me just have a look here. Yeah, some people, if I'm looking at this, there are 4 levels here. Let me just quickly chat through this, which might help answer your question. This is what's called level 0. Then this is called level 1. You know what's on the next level. This is all level 1. Then these items here along this is level 2, and these detailed activities down here are level 3, okay, which are measurable activities. Now, some people, and what you're asking is, you can say this here is phase 1 of the project, which is the kind of project initiation. Then there would be phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Monitoring and evaluation as a phase sits over most everything else, and isn't its own neat and tidy thing. But you can, if you wanted to, you could have it as a separate thing. But again, it's about breaking down the work. So I'm going to come back to this slide in a minute, but I don't know if that answers your question. I haven't given you a definitive answer. I think probably the answer is yes, you can use phases, provided the work under each phase is adequately itemized. Does that give you guidance?
Is especially now with seeing the different levels of the work breakdown structure. Thank you, Tim.
Okay, cool. I'll come back to that slide. I just want to chat through this quickly. You've got your main deliverables. Under each deliverable, specific activities. Sometimes those activities are broken down into smaller tasks, and the work breakdown structure must cover the full scope of the project. All boxes need to be numbered, and the format and layout, etc., must be well structured and nice and logical and carefully thought through. So let's look at this work breakdown structure first. This one, as I said, this is level 0, and it's kind of just the name of your project. It's just the title of your project. Then you've got your high level requirements or deliverables or objectives. So it's the main key things that would be done, and as has just been discussed, for some people this would be your phases, could be used here. Then under each of these, you've got, so under this deliverable, you've got 3 specific tasks that need to be done, and under each of these let me go back to level 1 here. So this is level 1, level 0 at the top, level 1 here, level 2, and level 3. On level 1, these are what are called high-level requirements or main deliverables. Then at level 2, you've got your sub-deliverables or smaller objectives, things that you have to deliver. Now, at this level here, your smaller deliverables, what specific activities need to be undertaken to make that happen. Because for each of these activities, you can then, if you know what each of these activities are in detail, all of these elements are, you can put a rand value to them. You can say how many hours or days each of these is going to take. You're going to say who is doing each of these activities. And based on that, you can add everything up and come up to good totals for your whole project. So let me give you an example. Let's say this section here, here we're just using, this is like an IT project, system change 2, for example. But let me change that name and say it's, you need to design a spec for some new software that's going into your company. And you need to know what that new software, what you're looking for that software to have in terms of its functionality. That would involve setting up a workshop with the staff to find out what they need out of this new software you're developing. Okay, so this chunk of work might say finalized as a deliverable. It might say final spec sheet for new software. So I'm just going to put here final spec. Now what's involved in that? It's when we want to get a final spec sheet, what we have to do is consult with all the staff in the company. So it might be that we've got to organize a workshop. Okay, so the workshop that we have to organize for this involves booking a venue. So this is booking a venue. Forgive my writing here. I'm scribbling with my digital tablet here. That might be to book a venue. This might be because we're going to have catering for the workshop. This might be organizing catering. This might be the invitations that get sent out to that workshop. And then you know how long each of these activities is going to take, who's going to be doing what, how long it's going to take for you to do, how much it's going to cost, and so on. And you've got specific activities that need to happen. And then another activity under here would be notes of the workshop, taking notes of the workshop, and then the final spec document approved. Okay. So that would be some further activities under that. So I'm just simply trying to show that at this level down here, you're dealing with very particular specific tasks and activities that can be measured carefully, measurable activities. How long is it going to take? You know, organize, if we go back to here, this box, system change 2, and we say, hold a workshop. And that's the title. Now, can you cost that? Do you know how long it's going to take? Hold a workshop. What does hold a workshop mean? Hold a workshop doesn't mean anything. You've got to unpack the detail of that. Now, somebody who holds workshops every week and does it for a living, they would know, and they might not need to unpack this in further detail. But for most people who are doing a project and it's new to them, they would want to think through, okay, we've got to, and here's another activity, we've got to organize a data projector and a laptop so we can, or a flip chart. Now I'm going into minute detail here, but I'm trying to highlight what a work breakdown structure must include in terms of detail to show you've thought through. Now, some of you might be sitting here getting really scared and thinking, hell, I can't unpack this all for a whole project. I'm not expecting you to do every single item for your project at super detail, but you must show at least some of your project. You must show for some of your project that you've unpacked sufficient detail to show that you can think through the stuff and look at the relevant detail, in order that once you've done your work breakdown structure, you can say how much everything is going to cost, how many hours and days it's going to take, who is going to be doing what, and you can add all of those things up, and then you put all of these together and it becomes a total for that, and it becomes a total with all of these items here. Okay, so that's the thinking behind a work breakdown structure. Do the work breakdown, do the WBS properly, and the rest of the project becomes a bit of a breeze. Doing your Gantt chart becomes much easier when your WBS has been done carefully and thoughtfully. Let's just look at, this is a very similar thing. I'm not going to talk through this much, but here's an example to answer your question earlier of someone who's done phase 1, phase 2. But again, this doesn't necessarily mean project phase. It might be phases of work within the actual work of the project, not kind of overall project management phases. Deliverable 1.1, deliverable 1.2. deliverable 21, 22, 23, and then under that you've got 111, 112, then 121, 122, and so on. And these are work packages or activities or tasks that make up this deliverable, which make up this phase, which make up the overall project. Now, this is a very, small sample. You've got how many boxes here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You've got 10 boxes here at the bottom level. Basically, you've got 10 boxes with summary boxes above them. For your Gantt chart, you need at least 20, probably more like 25 or 30 activities to show that you've thought through everything adequately. But as I've just said on the previous slide, you don't have to unpack minute detail for your whole project, but you must show that you have, for at least some of the project, thought through the detail that goes into it. Any questions on the WBS? Okay, in that case, and by the way, if you do think of questions at the end, we can you can come back to questions. We'll have question time at the end as well.
So Tim, I have one.
Then, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, for the WBS, I just want to find out the actual format of it, because I know you can orientate it differently. So where
Yes,
the one that you're showing now breaks everything down in stages, but there is another one
yeah,
that I found that's actually horizontal or vertical. Is it fine if I
right.
use that one?
Yeah, vertical's fine, provided it makes sense and it's logical. That's cool. If it reads well, that's fine. Yeah,
Okay.
that's cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is the work breakdown structure. The format I prefer is this format in the sense of it looks a bit like an organogram, an
Yeah.
organizational chart of
No, because
there's the boss and the division. Now, if you align that vertically, that's fine.
yeah, the thing is, I did try it in this method, but it keeps on adjusting.
Yeah.
Whenever I try and add in a whole lot of other
Yes.
tables, it keeps making
Yeah.
them smaller, and I have to keep on adjusting. So, because I'm doing it, I'm doing it in Word, so I don't have Visio.
I hear you. Okay. No, that's fine. Then do it vertically, but provided and your numbering of the boxes will reveal the logic of it. So that's fine.
Yeah, it does seem to be logical. So, and the numbering is in there.
Yeah, because if this is box number 1, for example, that's 2 and that's 3,
Yeah.
then this is 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and this is 2.1.1, 2.1.2, 2.1.3.
Yeah, correct. So that's how I've numbered it.
So that's 221, 222, 223. Now, if you do this layout in a vertical format and the numbering follows that same logic, then you're cool. That's
Okay,
fine.
no problem. Thanks.
Good question. Thanks for asking. Okay, then to question 4, which is a procurement plan. Using the work breakdown structure, it says created above, choose one resource or item that the project requires. So one resource or item that the project requires and may need to be bought or made by somebody else. In other words, purchased in some way. Create a procurement plan for the one resource or item selected for 10 marks, and the plan should provide evidence showing how the service provider was selected and give 3 quotes and stating the reasons for selecting the service provider. That's 6 marks out of the 10. And then the list and why of at least 2 documents that should be kept for record keeping purposes. Sorry, I'm just trying to piece it together. The question, 4.1. Just want to go back to, if you don't mind, I'm just going to out of this and go to the portfolio of evidence. And I just want to scroll up here. Sorry about this. I just want to cross-check something on the content here. Part 2. So question 4, yeah, it has these two things. It's create a procurement plan. The procurement plan should provide evidence of the following. So yeah, this is the 10 marks. So it's these 10 marks for 4.1 is made up of 6 marks for part A and 4 marks for part B. And then there's another 10 marks for question 4.2, determine the budget of the project. So I just wanted to clarify that I'd got the format correct for that. Okay, so it's a procurement plan. And now my pen has changed color again. No, I don't want that color. Okay, so how the service provider was selected. So you've got to get, for this one thing you've chosen, one item in your project, and it might be, choose something that's got some kind of equipment or material in it. You've got to buy a computer, or you've got to hire some equipment, or something where you're using a service provider or some company to buy something from or hire something from, and get 3 quotes and stating the reasons for selecting the service provider. So you must show 3 quotes and then state which of the 3 you would choose and why. Okay, so this is part A. I'm talking about part A here. Get 3 quotes and state the reason for choosing one of those quotes. Why would you choose that quote? Was it the cheapest? Was it the best quality? Now, somebody asked me last night in the other group, do you have to get real company quotes, or can you make stuff up? The answer is you can make things up. You can generate your own quotes, do fake quotes, just pretend ones on, do in Microsoft Word or something like that, or Excel. Generate some fake quotes, provided they sound vaguely realistic. And as I've said before, vaguely realistic means just that the amount of money they're quoting is roughly in the right ballpark for what you are trying to buy. Now, I'm not going to go and check against real service providers, but if you're saying we've got to buy a flight from Johannesburg to Cape Town, you're not going to get quotes for 40,000 Rand for a flight, standard passenger flight on Kalula or Fly Safir or something like that. There's not going to be 40,000 Rand for Joburg to Durban or Joburg to Cape Town. And likewise, it's also not going to be 40 Rand. So if you say a flight costs 40 Rand or 40,000 Rand, I'm going to query it and say, that doesn't sound quite so realistic. But if you've put, a figure that's vaguely realistic, I'm not going to go and say, no, it should be 4,200, not 4,100. So, don't worry about the minute detail, but just as it's provided, it's vaguely realistic. Yeah, question?
Hi, Tim.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you get real quotes and they email the quotes to you, can you take a screenshot of that quote and then just paste that picture of it in the Word document?
Yeah, you can. Alternatively, you can, if you're able to, I don't know, some people have access to PDF software where you can assimilate, put everything together into one PDF document. You can upload multiple documents for your assignment submissions, by the way. You can do your main Word document, which contains your main text of your assignment, and then you might have a separate file for your Gantt chart and a separate file for your work breakdown structure, PDF files, for example. But yeah, for quotes, if you've got real ones and they've emailed it to you, you can either print them to PDF and attach them that way, or you can take screenshots and drop them into your Word document. That's fine.
Thank you, Tim.
Pleasure. Cool. Good question. Okay, so 4.1 is your procurement plan, and part A is 3 quotes, and say why you've chosen one of those quotes. Part B is fairly simple for 4 marks. Give a list and why of at least 2 documents that should be kept for record record keeping purposes in relation to procurement plan. So you would keep invoices, you would maybe keep quotes, you would, just 2 or 3 documents that should be kept for record keeping purposes in relation to buying things from somebody. Okay. So there's some guidance on page 148 to 152 of the textbook. Okay, so that's the procurement plan. And then 4.2 for the other 10 marks out of the total of 20 is determine the budget of the project. So again, it says choose one resource or item that the project requires and may need to be bought or made. Now, it's a bit confusing here because it says choose one and then determine a budget. But actually what they're asking for is a more fuller budget for your whole project. So it's the budget of the whole project. And attach your project to your project budget, provide a list of examples of service providers, sellers, and or buyers. Don't worry, I mean, buyers doesn't really make sense to me, but service providers and sellers. Now, this is not asking you to get quotes from all of them. They're just asking you to list who would you use, catering companies. And again, they don't have to be real companies, but it's just more categories of things that you would use for your project. IT programmers, IT equipment providers, licensing arrangements from whatever. Just trying to think. Okay, so and then you must have a budget. So see pages 141 to 144. Make sure you've included everything in the project, and make sure, as I've said, your prices are vaguely realistic. I won't be checking exact rates and prices, that they should be in the right ballpark. So this would just be typically a table, and it would just have your items for your project, and then your kind of quantity and your rate and your total. You can structure it how you like. I'm just saying these are the kinds of things that you would put into it. And then at the bottom must be your total project value. Okay, how much is your project going to cost overall? Okay, so they want the total budget of the project with some thought and detail put into that. Any questions around 4.2, the budget, and 4.1, procurement? Okay, then the last question in task 2 is for 10 marks. It's simply to do some screen grabs of your setup of whatever project software you are using, probably Team Gantt for most of you. If those of you who have access to MS Project and are using that, that's fine. You can do screenshots of that. Some of you might have found some other project management software that shows adequately a good Gantt chart. But really, whatever you use, this question for 10 marks is simply to do some screenshots to show that you have started working on your Gantt chart. You started working on the software in some way. So you need screenshots to show project creation, project properties, project information, calendar, and formatting and customization. And it gives some more detail, like it goes on to reword the question. Using the software, complete the following setup tasks to match the project scenario, chart to the WBS activity list, and other information. Now, you can actually go ahead and set up your Gantt chart because it'll save you the hard work of doing it when your final POE is due 2 weeks after this one is due. This is really what we're suggesting you do, but you must at least begin setting up. So create the project and save it. Update the project properties, look at any information regarding start to finish of the project. Again, this is, it's a bit of an overlap. It's not very well worded. But I think I showed you this in a previous session. I showed you some of the, in talking about Team Gantt, and I'll give a link to that just now. You've got to set the project calendar, start and finish times, working and non-working days, and formatting the chart. Okay, so as I've just said, I covered Team Gantt. I did a full demo of it in our Collab session on 21 April. The link to the video is here. This is the link to the YouTube video. And I start discussing Team Gantt at 28 minutes into the session. So about half an hour into the session, I start talking about Team Gantt, and I take you through what you need to do to get Team Gantt set up. Hopefully many of you have done this already. If you haven't, I'd suggest you get onto it pretty quickly. You don't want to be doing this at 8 o'clock on Monday night next week. By then it'll be too late and you will, crash. Rather get started on it soon. Play around with Team Gantt a little bit and get used to using it. Also, there are some guides which I've given already. I've shown these links already, some YouTube videos on how to get started on Team Gantt. And then also to note, you can assign 3 people, including yourself, plus 5 what are called labels or resources. So the maximum number of people on a project is 3, and the maximum number of resources is 5. Now, you can actually call a resource a name. You can put the name Peter or Ayanda or Sibusiso or whatever you like in as under the resources. So what I'm saying is you've actually got a total of 8 to work with, 3 people and 5 labels. So I'm suggesting you work with 5 or 6 people and 2 or 3 resources. That's the maximum you can use on Team Gantt, and it's really just to show that you can that you've demonstrated the assigning of resources to tasks. Okay, and as we've said, your task team has to be at least 5 people. That's a requirement of the assignment. So you've got 3 plus another 2 from your 5 resources. Hope that makes sense, but I'm just telling you what the kind of constraints are on Team Gantt if you're using the free version of Team Gantt. Okay, any questions on task 2 that's due next week and on the Gantt chart and showing that? Because I'm actually going to go through and chat through in a bit more detail now the final task, just to give you a heads up on that. Any questions on what we've covered so far? Okie dokes. So that's Team Gantt. Then the final task of your POE, and I will have another national support session a week before this one's due. There are 6 activities. Activity 1 and 2 are basically the same thing, but you're doing it for activity 1, you are doing it in relation to task 1 that was due in April. For activity 2, you are doing it in relation to task 2 that is due next Monday. And I will have feedback back to you guys within probably 6 or 7 days at the latest, hopefully. I do technically have 7 working days in which to mark the assignment, but I'm aiming to get it all out much quicker than that because you've got very little time actually to deal with. So I'm going to talk about these questions now in a bit more detail. Activity 3 is a discussion around ICE tasks. Look at the mark allocation as well for these. 5 marks for activity 1, 5 marks for activity 2, and 5 marks for activity 3. And remember that that's 5 out of a total of 300, your 3 tasks put together. So it's not a lot of marks for these 3 items. It's a total actually of 15 out of 300. It doesn't count for a lot, so don't spend hours on this, but I'll come back to that. Activity 4 is a resource assignment matrix for 25 marks. Then the main question is your Gantt chart. And as I've said, if you do your work breakdown structure carefully, it makes it hell of a easy just to drop those activities into your Gantt chart and sequence them. And if you are doing that last question on task 2, where you're doing the screen grabs of setting up your Gantt chart, you've already got some of the way to doing it, and you can actually load your activities and then use the subsequent 2 weeks in June to fine-tune things and improve and tweak it. So I won't mind. I'm not going to check your final Gantt chart against your screen grabs, if I can put it that way. Does that make sense? The screen grabs you do in task 2 I'm not going to check those against your final Gantt chart. Your final Gantt chart stands alone as a submission under question 5 in this final task. So I mark it as a standalone thing. Does it not quite stand alone? It needs to tie back to the work breakdown structure in some way. But the detail in it, you can add and put in a lot more detail in the 2 weeks running up to your final submission. And then there's a reflection report. So what's required around this? I'm not going to go through, actually, let me just rephrase. I'm not going to do activity 6 tonight, nor these first 3. I've chatted a little bit about them already, I think, but just to note, as I've said, resubmitting task 1 with corrections is not critical. Actually, I'm going to give some more detail around those definitely a week before what's due. So let me just talk about, sorry, I just want to see something here that is there. Let me jump ahead to the resource assignment matrix, and then I will come back to the other questions. Question 4 is a resource assignment matrix. Create a resource assignment matrix for the project. Should show the following: resources, not less than 5, quantity of resources, responsibility, so who looks after it and manages. Okay, so it's a table showing the resource, at least 5 of them, the quantity required, who is responsible for looking after and managing that resource, what activity that resource is going to be involved with, and the duration of that resource being on the project. And then beneath that main question, there are 2 sub-questions which you must answer because they're worth 5 marks each. It asks you this: how the required resource was identified and estimated, and then how this actually drops onto the next page. Some people missed this question in the group last year, so be careful not to miss this question. How the resources will be managed using a determined resource management plan. So please make sure you read about that and put something together for that, for submitting. So here's an example, and I've just given a rough example here. These are resources. Project manager, there's 1 of her. Who's responsible? The head of projects will look after the project manager, and in other words, she reports to the head of projects. Activities, doing the whole project, developing, etc., and on the project for 360 hours. These would be hours here. Financial manager, responsible, the CEO is responsible for the financial manager, etc. Here's some, and then you would put in other staff. Then there's a couple of non-human resources. 2 laptop computers. They are the responsibility of the software developers. They are used on these activities, and there's 200 hours that they are required for, and some mobile phones, etc. So a very rough table of your resource matrix or resource table for the resource requirements. The Gantt chart, jumping ahead a little bit, but this is a layout from Team Gantt, and it's to show you the sort of thing that would be required. Let me just zoom in. You've got your activities. Now, these come from your work breakdown structure. So you've got your summary task up here. This is, this is a summary task, and it's shown by this gray bar here, or this dark gray bar. And then the activities underneath it, all showing in blue here with the relevant lines or links joining. I talked through this on Team Gantt on the 21st of April collab we had. Milestones must show. You must have at least 5 or 6 milestones. I think it's 6 that are required, and so on. So you've got all of your information showing there. Here's another example from Team Gantt. Color Unfinished Festival. All the activities with summary activities. So this ties back to your kind of that organogram layout of your work breakdown structure. Start and finish dates for all the activities in these 2 columns here, and then the bars representing with links sequencing showing, and there are some very small milestone diamonds showing here. There's one there and another one here. Okay, and then obviously you've also got who's responsible, the sound and light manager, and it might be that you also include some equipment as the resources attached to those. So just giving you some guidance on the sort of Gantt chart we're looking at. Okay, so that's the Gantt charts. Let's come back to activities 1 and 2 just for clarity. It's a collection of your POE task 1 and 2 activities submitted in the semester. Ensure that you submit the marked POE. So I say see note below, and the note below says this: you do not need to resubmit your entire POE task 1 and your entire POE task 2, as these are already uploaded on the system. I've already got access to those. Please don't resubmit everything. Just submit the sections in which you have made corrections. And what I am looking for is to show that you have read through my comments, that you've picked up my comments, that you've made a few corrections to some of the things, and you've responded to some of the stuff that I've done. I'm really not expecting you to spend hours and hours going through for the total of 10 marks. Activity 1, which is to, basically they're asking you to redo your task 1 and redo your task 2 and to get it better, for a total of 10 marks. I don't agree with this mark weighting, and it does not change your final mark from your previous submissions. So in doing your corrections to task 1 and your corrections to task 2, I'm not going to go back and give you a better mark for those assignments. If you got 60% for task 1, that 60% sticks. You can't change your mark for that. Okay, so it's just to show that you have read through the comments and responded to those. So activity 1 and 2 is looking through task 1 and task 2, putting together some responses to that and a brief explanation of what was recommended and how you have implemented the recommendations. Just a note at the bottom here, these two activities account for 10% of the final task mark, and therefore just 3.5% or less of your final total course mark, which is why I'm saying do not spend hours and hours and hours on this, because it's really not worth it for the marks that are available. Just demonstrate that you have picked up some of the comments that I've referred to you to in my feedback to you. Activity 3 is vaguely similar. It's also for 5 marks, not a lot of marks, but it's really just to discuss through your ICE tasks that you did. Which was your best ICE task? Now, it does say something here. It says submit all 4 ICE tasks and 1 consolidated report on your 4 ICE tasks. Please note, you do not need to submit your ICE tasks. Again, those were quizzes that were done online or things that were emailed to me. Please do not submit ICE tasks again. I've got those. Okay, so all you need to do is just respond to these questions. So it's a brief report on the ICE task. Describe the 4 or 5 ICE tasks. Which was best? What was the task about? How did you do in it? What knowledge did you acquire? What hard and soft skills you learned as a result of that ICE task? So it's a kind of a reflection activity on the ICE tasks. In the resources, I've spoken through the resources and that table that you do, the resource assignment matrix. And this is kind of the mark breakdown of that. So it's the resources, at least 5 of them for 5 marks. The quantity must show for 2 marks, responsibility for 2 marks, activities for 2 marks, duration for 2 marks, and your layout gets us to spare 2 marks there. And then beneath that, you need to state, as I've said already, how were they identified and estimated, and then how they will be managed using a determined resource assignment matrix, and that's page 137, 138 of the textbook. So it asks you to discuss a little bit of the theory of a resource management plan. Okay, a determined resource management plan, and that's for 5 marks. And I've chatted through that. That's just another layout. Responsibility is who is responsible for managing the resource. Activities means what that resource will be doing or be involved with. So responsibility is here and activities is here, and an estimate of duration there. And then the final task is the Gantt chart. Just one thing else to note, if you are using software, you do not need to use the table or template that's on page, I think, 22 of the assignment. The Gantt chart contains all this information. So they give you a table, and that table is from the old days when no one had, some people rather, didn't have access to project management software. You guys will all be using software, so you don't need to use that table template they give. It's kind of just a boxed table, and it's not necessary. So as it says, at least 20 activities. You need to have a number, name, duration, schedule, and sequence with dependencies. I've chatted through this already. Phases, summary, tasks, deliverables, and work packages. Talked about the resources or labels, as they're called. Show at least 6 milestones and estimate the cost of each task with the total budget. You can do this on a separate table, the budget. And in fact, you'd probably just be copying the budget from the previous question. And by the way, if it's asking for the same thing, like in this case with the budget, then copy and paste from previous is fine. There's no problem for that. And see page 23 for the marking rubric of that. And then the last thing would be a reflection report. And this is in 2 parts. Part A is answer the 5 questions on page 24 of the assignment. And then part B is attach a scan of the rubric on pages 25 and 26 and write in your own score that you think how you would score yourself. So you've got to mark yourself on your reflection report. I will then either confirm or change your mark depending on how I feel you've answered the questions. So there are 5 questions to answer, and then scan the rubric, filling it in for yourself as if you're marking yourself for this question on the reflection report. Okay, referencing and plagiarism. I've been through these before, but I'm going to just read through this again. For tasks 2 and 3, I'm going to be far more strict. You must have both in-text referencing and a list of references at the end of each of your submissions. In other words, you've done it for task 1 in April. For task 2, which is due at the end of May, you must have at the end of that a list of references. And likewise, you must also have a list of references at the end of your final task, which is due on the 15th of June. It must have at least 3 items in it. Listing various chapters of one book does not qualify as different sources, and you must list your sources correctly. With regard to Safe Assign, you may not scan an assignment into a PDF and submit it. You can print your document to PDF. So Safe Assign needs to be able to read it, your text, as if it's text. A scanned image cannot be read, and therefore won't qualify as a submission, except there is an exception to this. Is where you've copied and pasted in like those quotes that you've got that were mentioned earlier around your question from one of you. Sorry, I can't recall who asked, but where you've scanned and inserted a scanned image of a quote, that's fine. I'm not going to, not fuss about that. But the body of your text of your assignment must be readable. As I've said, you must do in-text referencing by author, surname, and year of publication after each or with each answer. And then you must have a reference list on a separate page in alphabetical order of surname of the author or the name of the organization or institution that published that work, with a minimum of 3 resources. You don't need bullet points or numbering. In-text referencing with each answer, as we've said here, it says, as an example 1, according to Guido Clements and Rain 2018, the project selection, wada wada, and you go on to say it. Here's another example of in-text referencing. The project selection process has 4 steps, in brackets, Guido et al. 2018. Now, the first time you mention a book in your in-text referencing, you put all the authors. If there's, 2 or more. The next time you mention that same work in your in-text referencing, you just say Guido et al. If there's only one author, you just give the author's surname, okay, and the year of publication always. And then your bibliography or list of references at the end of each submission. Here's just an example. And in fact, this is out of order. This would be number 1. This would be number 2. This would probably be number 3, number 4, and number 5 would be this one here. What? Okay, so it's by in alphabetical order by the name, the surname of the authors, or the institution or organization that published it. So Project Management Institute, year of publication, title of the work, 6th edition, place of publication, and who published it. Second example, Donovan Ferreira N and O'Donovan J, 2018, Project Management and Administration, 2nd edition, Cape Town, published by Edge Learning Media. Here's a couple of Gantt charts. Sorry, not Gantt charts, a couple of websites. Team Gantt, 2020, how to create Gantt charts. So that's the title of the web page, the year it was published. Now, you might not always have that. It's quite difficult on many websites to find the date in which it was made available. You find it online, available at the full URL. I must be able to click on that URL and it takes me to the very website you looked at and the date on which you accessed it, 17th of March 2020. Okay, so do not use et al. In your list of references. You only use et al. In your in-text references. The names of all authors of a book must be included in your list of references. Okay, I am done for this evening. Sorry for the long session. It's what, 8:10. I know some NSS sessions go on for like 2 hours or more. Some of the facilitators are really keen. But I know it's 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night and we're probably tired. Are there any questions from anyone as we wrap up? Let me just close this. Ramon, you're asking. Did you want to ask, Ramon? Hello, who wanted to ask something?
It's Ningi. Tim, I was
Yes,
just checking with regarding to the assignment. You said we can also like split it up and rename our files different. You're just checking, especially since this one we'll be having some photos on what file size with the submission line accept.
Yeah. Yeah, you can when you submit more than one file, and there is a way to do that. I'm not quite sure how to do it, but there is a way to upload for an assignment submission 3 or 4 or 5 different documents. So you can have the main Word document or PDF file for your main text. You might have a PDF image of your work breakdown structure, a PDF of your Gantt chart, and so on. So you can upload more than one file, provided it's uploaded in the same assignment submission and it's all accessible and readable. That's fine.
It doesn't basically have the specific size. Probably like your file has to be not more than that for one-time submission.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the file size limits are. It's pretty big, I think. I don't think they're too fussed. And also, whatever you submit, I will look through, provided it's all under the same attempt. If you submit multiple attempts, I only mark the last one. So just make sure you pack all of the documents together as one submission, and whatever you have under that one submission, I will look through and I will make sure I find what's there.
All right, thank you, Tim.
Cool, pleasure. Who else has a question? Tamani?
No,
Just
thank you.
remember
No,
Yeah, go
thank
ahead.
you. It is. No, my question has been answered. Thank you.
Great. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure, Tamani.
Okay. Bye.
Sheree, did you want to ask? I see your hand's also up, or was it from an earlier question?
Sorry, it was from an earlier
Okay.
question.
No problem. That's fine. Okay. Any last comments or questions from anyone? Otherwise, I wish you all the best in the week to go. hang in there. You're welcome to email me. Just don't email me at 7 o'clock next Monday night. That's too late. Give it a few days. So get working on the stuff now. And I can answer questions by email as we go through the week. So from my side, thanks very much, guys. I'm going to stay online a bit longer for those who might want to ask any further questions. But if you want to go and sign out, that's cool. Thanks, guys, for participating, and we'll be in touch for the next session. I am going to stop recording.